Hi, welcome to another episode of the Self-Reliant Creative Process, how you can master your creativity and your productivity. So let's have a quick review because we're a few episodes in at this point. And we talked about the big idea of the creative process, and it's about following the energy of your life, and that there's an internal world inside of you with needs and wants, and there's this external world of bosses and other people expecting things of you. Imagine that. But balancing that, working between those worlds. And I told you about my friend Andy, who was instrumental in helping me create this course, and without whom there would be no self-reliant creative process. So kudos to Andy. And we talked about some Venn diagrams, about the right and left side of the brain, and intuition and intellect, and Eastern and Western thinking. And while we can all be individually more prone and comfortable to one side, maybe we're more right-brained, we can begin to discern when it's a good idea to be left-brained a little bit, or when it's time to put our intellect down and pick up a little intuition and follow our gut and feel how things feel. So, and there's also one more big Venn diagram coming up, but not in this video, but it'll be coming soon, so stay tuned for that one. What we're going to cover today is two guidelines, the first two guidelines, and they are, well, they're all important, but these first two set the tone for the entire creative process. And the first one is removing judgment at the beginning of the process. We must suspend judgment during the idea stage of our creations and any potential activity we seek to take on. You have to give yourself complete permission to dream and explore. Nothing off the table, nothing too outlandish, uncensored. Think in terms of what you can do, not what you can't do. Allow for complete freedom of exploration. Now, neuroscience, yes, neuroscience calls this divergence. This is the mind free to explore without inhibition, without constriction, to consider any and all perceptions. See, children are so creative because they readily access this divergent part of their brain. And they also don't have a large cognitive developed brain either. And so they're just free to explore and make stuff up all the time and go with it, and they just go with it. And we need to go with it, certainly at the beginning. Because all too frequently, the mere idea of initiating something creates this like tsunami of judgment, why it won't work, and I'm not good enough, or I don't have the resources, how will this go together, it's the wrong time in my life. Everyone's got their favorite. And by the way, what's the favorite you have that comes up as soon as you start getting ideas? How do you, boom, shut them right down? Put it in the comments below, and we'll see if we can do something about that, help you out a little bit. So here's the point. Judgment at the beginning of the creative process represents the single greatest impediment to the creative process itself. Now let's distinguish between judgment to discern, which is the process of selection or choosing, versus judgment for condemnation. So we'll get to the selecting and the choosing in a minute. But where we want to be first is a complete and total exploration of the idea of what the project could be. We don't want to assign judgment right away because it narrows our viewpoint and it disconnects us from possibility. The discernment will advance into this process when it comes time, but not right away. It is so critically important. I'll give you a great example of somebody I know of. And that is Jerry Garcia of the band The Grateful Dead. And Jerry totally personifies this concept because he wasn't into practice. He just played. I remember once he was interviewed and they're like, well, how do you, get the band together and work out your songs? And he's like, huh? Yeah, practice the leads and the riffs it's like, we don't do that. We just play. And I had a client who went to 150 Dead shows. Now that's a lot of Dead shows. And he spent the better part of a decade of his life and time and money going to those shows. But he said something to me that was absolutely insightful. He said, a third of the shows sucked. Garbage, lousy, horrid. I'm like, oh. And then a third of the shows, well, they were okay. I mean, sort of glad I went and, all right. It's like, wow. But the other third, yeah, they were magic. They were beyond the beyond. They were extraordinary. Jerry was willing to fall on his face, and he often did, to find that magic. He wasn't afraid. And I know that's a very, very, in a sense, far-fetched example, but he always arrived at every show because he didn't know what he was going to play until he started playing, which is why no one ever opened for the Dead. It was always a blank page, a canvas, fresh, every single time, after years and years of doing it. And that's why. I've been doing massage therapy and coaching and for decades. And people say, well, don't you get tired of it or bored or this or that? And it's like, no, because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. When I put my hands on somebody, on their body, what comes up in conversation, where it might go, I have no idea. So I just show up and then it happens. I turn myself over to it. Yes, I have skill set. Yes, I have time on task. I have a level of mastery. But the most important thing is to let it go. And it's real interesting because a lot of times when we talk to each other, just normal conversation. I was just talking to somebody the other day and they were talking about their job. And, there's some things about their job they don't like and they're concerned with. And as they were talking, they started to get into more detail and they're like, gee, I hadn't thought about this, but I feel about this, about my job and that and this person and my own ability and on and on and on. And I just listened, fed them a question here or there and just allowed them to process because it wasn't time for solution. It wasn't time for that. It was time to understand what you're feeling. Get out of your head, get in your heart. What's up? What's going on? And let's know as much as we can about what's going on so then when it comes time to a solution, we've accounted for all the moving parts. And it's so easy in life because you want to be somebody's friend and that, and you want to be valuable to people. So, boy, he solves problems. He gets right to the core of it and this and that. And it's like, well, it's not always the right thing to do. And it's not always what's necessary. Sometimes it's just about hearing and listening and being heard and just talking out loud and thinking out loud and exploring. And when you have fully explored and exhausted yourself, then it's different. It's a different moment. So there are essentially three qualities of the freedom to explore. One is to consider everything and judge nothing. Second is to identify questions as they arise. And third is to formulate a broad stroke for the project. And as soon as you've done that, the very next second, take a deep breath and we're on to guideline number 2. And that is kill your creation before you ever get started. See, once you've examined and come up with all your ideas and exhausted your imagination and idea generating, you take a breath and you shift gears all the way. And now it's time to analyze this creation being conjured up and try taking it apart completely. And you try to kill your creation. And this is a reference meaning you don't fall in love with your creations until you've vetted them. Because if it's not going to happen, this idea you have, it's really good to know that straight off. Because why invest time, energy, and resources and they end up being wasted? And Andy had a teacher back in the day, and the guy constantly harped about the students not getting carried away with their artistic creations. And this is critically important. And in neuroscience, this is called convergence. See, we talked before about divergence, expanding and going out and possibilities and just a beautiful thing. And now, time to bring it in. It's like a breath, in and out. And now we apply reasoning and rational and objective thought, and we discern whether our idea or creation will work or not. So first it's divergence, then it's convergence. So if we successfully kill our creation, and by the way, because this will come up, it'll slip, so I might as well put it out right now. Andy and I have lots of little phrases and sayings about the creative process, shortcuts. We all have them in our languaging, but the way we look at it, we're not really killing our creations. We are killing our babies because we're making babies all the time. Ideas constantly come up and come up and come up. And there's a point where it's time to try to kill the baby. And if you're done, then you move on to the next idea. So if you want to think of it as killing your creation, that's fine. But if I slip and say kill your baby, you'll know why. All right. So if we can't kill it and it holds up under scrutiny, now it's time to ask ourselves, considering the moving parts involved, do we still want to move forward? Yes or no? If not, we let the idea or the creation go and we continue on to the next one. If we still want to continue, it's time to get cracking. So, first that freedom, imagination and exploration, and far and wide as possible, and then put that one down if you can. So, 3 outcomes. 1, we killed the creation. 2, we didn't kill it, but we now know enough about it and what's involved, and we're not so interested really in pursuing it. That's fine. Or 3, we didn't kill it, and based on the information, we still want to proceed. Then it's time to go. Now we're ready. Now we're ready. Not before. So here's the deal. It's one thing for a child to create art. And you hang it on the fridge and everyone can see and acknowledge the little artist and it's just a wonderful thing and it's just great. Until they do the next one and the next one. And maybe their parents save them in a box someday, but otherwise, they're not going to come of anything other than time on task, which in and of itself, however, is very important. But folks, we're adults here, and we're trying to breathe life into our creations. We're trying to harness our abilities, and we're trying to create some pixie dust. And part of this is that when we don't exist in a world of scarcity, we can stomach killing our creations. Because we know there will emerge other ideas, in fact, many more ideas. If we think the current one that we're conjuring up is the only idea we're going to have today or beyond, we're going to hang on to that with everything we got because we have a scarcity about idea generation. And one time Andy told me that early in his design business, he realized the necessity of quickly cultivating more ideas. He was like, I'm not creating enough ideas. And so he worked on developing that and got to the point where ideas were flowing, and he developed a very decisive skill set, which was creating the idea, killing the idea, and then the ideas flowed, and killing them flowed right after them, but then he was sorting out the winning ideas from the ones that weren't winners amongst the pile. And I remember an interview of the songwriter Paul Simon, and back in the day he was very, very popular. He wrote a boatload of stuff, very prolific, very successful, and they were interviewing him, and back in the day when he was starting and reminiscing, as we all want to do as we get older, and the guy said, you know, the first song, evidently somebody sold it out from under him for $50 or something like that, whatever. And he was nonplussed. He was like, didn't bother me because I knew there would be many more. And I just was like, wow. Paul had no scarcity. He knew the next one was right around the corner. And if you can let go, and that's a very hard thing for us to let go of so many things. But if we can let go when we know it's time, then we open the door for the next thing, the next creation, the next project that could very likely be better than whatever we were hoping and wishing and praying for the last one would be. So I'll leave you with that. But I'll also leave you with a homework assignment. So I want you to ask yourself, how well do you allow unbridled creativity? And how hard is it for you to kill your creations? And what parts of life or your creativity do you struggle the most with? Put those comments down below after you like and subscribe. And thanks for watching. And you got places to go, people to see, and things to do. So I'll see you around like a donut in the next episode.